legislature this year in so many areas. I mean, you name it, and I can show you a good bill and a good budget.
State lawmakers did do a lot this legislative session, but Robert Gehrke says they also took more power away from city and county governments. Robert joins us now live via Zoom to talk about the trend.
Robert, good morning. I know you've got several examples of this. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, good morning, guys. A few weeks ago, coming into the session, we talked about this ongoing trend where the legislature was just accruing and accumulating more power. And so I wanted to look back at this session and kind of see if that trend continued. And not surprisingly, I don't think it did. And it sort of, the tone got set right out of the gate with this bill that was sponsored to repeal all mask mandates or mask requirements around the state that Senator Dan McKay sponsored. Whether you like masks or not, they had set this process in place that said, well, if county health departments want to put in a mask mandate and the county councils or county commissions want to go along with that, then that's okay. And then the first thing out of the gate, that literally the first bill they passed was one to rescind these mask mandates. Senator McKay, I talked to him, he said this is just part of the process, and it kind of is, but it's also a process that the legislature has put in place to just sort of keep chipping away at these powers of local governments.
Some of it, Robert, sounds like it was at least in part due to COVID-19, because they're starting to change how even local school districts can operate, needing somebody in the legislature to sign off before they take any action.
Yeah, I mean, that was another one that they've extended. I mean, they had this test to stay program in place. They rescinded that. Instead, now if a school district wants to go to remote learning, they would need approval of the governor, the state superintendent, and the Senate president and the House Speaker. That's pretty unusual to give the legislative branch a sort of executive type veto authority, but it's something they did. Another thing they did that we've kind of seen this evolving over the years is the creation of these authorities, is what they call them. Utah Transit Authority is one of them, but we saw the Military Installation Development Authority created in 2007 that's now developing property around Hill Air Force Base and doing a ski resort near Jordanelle. They've kind of recreated that. The Inland Port Authority, they changed that to they kicked off Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, West Valley, and Magna from that board, and replace them with another appointment from the Senate President and House Speaker. The Point of the Mountain Authority is one that before had been a planning authority. Now it's getting into the actual redevelopment of this old prison property. And then you have the Utah Lake Authority. The notion there being this authority that instead of leaving it to local governments to worry about the condition of Utah Lake, they're creating this one authority with members from the legislature to restore the lake. And people see that one in particular as a way for this island development, this real estate development. They want to build islands on the lake. They see it as a way to sort of facilitate that. The sponsor of the bill, Brady Brammer, says it absolutely is not that. So we'll just have to keep watching that one, I think.
So, Robert, what does this power grab boil down to? Does the legislature just want to be the decision maker, or perhaps do they think they know better?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, they did stuff as simple as, licensing food trucks. They didn't like the way cities were doing those, so they imposed some restrictions there. Senate President Adams says this is an ongoing process, an evolving process. The local governments are subdivisions of the state. The state ultimately has, ultimate authority. But there's always been sort of a respect given to cities and counties and school districts that the government, the more local the government, the better the decisions, the better the outcomes, rather than imposing these umbrella statewide policies. And so I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's really not much check on their power unless the governor decides he wants to veto some of these bills. And in the past, we just haven't seen him that willing to do it. He's vetoed about 4 out of the roughly 500 bills that have come across his desk. So unless that changes, I think it's reasonable to assume that this erosion of this accumulation of power by the legislature is going to continue as well.
Some of it seems like, there are things that are just unpopular in the more conservative areas of the state, and then just trying to make it a little bit more uniform. For example, requiring background checks at the gun shows in Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City that a lot of people outside of the area that come into Salt Lake City don't like.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, they want a blanket policy that represents the views of that portion of the state, and what you end up with is people outside of Salt Lake County essentially making policy for Salt Lake County. And so it kind of becomes a philosophical argument. The Republican legislature often says they like limited government, they like local control, and they do until the locals do something that they don't like, and then it becomes about controlling the locals, I think. And we saw that in several instances. There's one instance evolving up in Summit County where one of these housing bills actually directs Summit County essentially to approve this housing project that the local government didn't want or wasn't comfortable with. And so they've got to try to navigate that in the coming months. It's an ongoing process, and there aren't really a lot of checks and balances on the Republican legislature because the Democrats can't really do it, and the governor is chosen more often than not to do it. So I think we'll watch what the governor does over the next few weeks as he's deciding which of these bills to sign, and maybe he'll push back on some of these. I know there's going to be efforts to try to convince him to veto some of these bills, and we'll see if those work.
Robert, always interesting topics to discuss with you, and for our viewers that want to read, you can go to Robert Gehrke's column on saltlaketrib.com. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Good to see you.